Hi, hello, I'm Ellen, and while I am, yes, late to a goals video for this year, I think it's kind of a good time to talk a little bit about motivation for writing and how we can kind of, I say we, you're in this with me, how we/I can motivate myself this year, my second year doing the writer thing properly as a, I guess, full-time hobby. I'll talk a little bit about, I guess, some of my tips and just how I've done it so far. So I think that one of the easiest ways for me to feel motivated to write is just learning about writing craft. You can certainly get into rabbit holes with this and just do a lot more learning than you do writing, but I do think that it is still a good way to engage yourself in writing, obviously, and hopefully it sparks some ideas. And this is what I found to be the most valuable, is it sparks ideas that then mean that I immediately want to start writing on those aspects of it, or it gives me some. I just realized how big huge tree outside, and I really hope that it's not a weed. All right, sorry. I get very motivated when I learn something new about writing, and it just sometimes when it just clicks, it really helps the momentum of a story a lot more if you just understand a vital piece that makes you think, oh, that's how I do this plot twist or this next stage, or that's what I'm missing in my draft. That is a great way to get motivation. And I've kind of got listed down craft books, although I've had varying success with these so far. I will try not to go on a rant. Maybe later we'll do a rant. Podcasts as well. I think that I've already mentioned it before, but the Turning to Story podcast has been very useful for me. How they talk about craft in relation to different parts of their own stories. It just feels very I don't know, you just get into the spirit with them, and I think that is one of the biggest triggers for me to have some really good thoughts for my story. So writing podcasts, definitely useful. Obviously, YouTube is a huge resource. With that being said, I think that there are so many different types of resource on YouTube. So within the writing community, there are people who have published, there are people who are aspiring to get traditionally published or self-published. There are a whole bunch of newbies like me and potentially you if you're watching this. And then there are, I don't want to say scammers, but there are obviously also scammers in this community, as there are in any community where people can get money. Not that everyone who has resources that are not free is a scammer. I think it's very hard to make a living as a writer, so you need to supplement that income with putting out resources that people can also find useful if they want to be a writer. But there are a lot of scammers, and I've come across so many different incredibly motivating, useful, entertaining author-tube channels. I've also come across a lot that give me a really icky vibe. And not just there's one that's conservative propaganda. Not just that one. There have been other ones that are they seem normal, and then they start talking about selling you a course to become, to also sell courses to other people, which is just MLM in different clothes. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant already. I have a feeling this is going to be a bit tangenty. But in terms of YouTube, I think, you really have a mix of people who are in the same boat as you, or people who are across many, many years into their career. And I think that's why it's so useful, because you can really pick up things ahead of time. I have really seen people go through full journeys, and it's taught me a lot about the publishing industry, as well as, sometimes it is just nice to hear that someone is similarly struggling with a thing that you are also struggling with, and learning how other people deal with the kind of needing to balance, life and writing. It's interesting and it's nice, even if you're not I'm not really much of an engager with that content, but I love to watch it. and I find it to be very useful. There is the risk, of course, that you can pick up bad advice, and I think I have internalized some bad advice and then had to course correct. I think essentially at one point I feel like I was discouraged from writing interiority, and then it clicked again to me that interiority is what differentiates books from other mediums, and so why? Why would I want to take away what is one of the core functions, basically, of a book over another art medium? I think you can definitely get yourself into a situation where you're like, oh, this person said this thing is bad, and I believe them. Basically, just make sure that the advice you're taking in is useful. And if you find it's not useful, don't be afraid to try another thing, because I have a real distaste or dislike for people who present things as though they can only be done in one way, when demonstrably writers, authors do things differently. The only consistent advice is that, you keep breathing, and that's it. That's the only thing. You keep breathing and you keep writing. Those are pretty much the two things. You don't want to get stuck into, I guess, just hearing a lot of stuff and then feeling like you need to implement every different thing that another person's talking about, even if they directly contradict each other, which will definitely happen. It really is good to, if you're going to take on board someone's advice, just consider, this is advice for everything, but just consider where they're coming from. They might be, they might think that books that are high tier, exactly what you should be aiming for, are not the sort of books that you're trying to write towards. I've seen advice that implies that no one cares about character. The focus should be on the plot, not the character. People aren't there for your character. And that just is very different to how, there's a magpie outside. I'm getting very distracted by the window today. Basically, sorry. I've seen someone imply that character doesn't matter, that it's the events of the plot that are more important to an audience, and that just isn't how I read or how I really want to write, because characters are one of the most important, if not the most important factor in a story for me. So just consider like where people are coming from when they're giving you advice. So I actually had like a whole section prepared talking about the different breakdowns of different YouTube channels, but then the Cozy Creative put out one called I Am Not Your Writing Messiah, and I think they do a really good, or she does a really good job of summarizing everything there, and also just like she has such an interesting viewpoint as someone who has published both traditionally and self-published, and leaning more towards writing to market versus writing for more personal reasons. I think that she's just absolutely fascinating, and also that video is very good for summarizing, I think, some of the content of different YouTube channels and working out whose advice you want to take, basically. One of the ones I've enjoyed recently as well is a video called Why Writing Your Book Matters More Than You Think by It's Amina, because it's very good for motivation, essentially. It is really nice to, even if you're not part of a community, or maybe especially if you're not part of a community, it's nice to be able to feel like you have this in common with other people, and seeing their journey is kind of just one part of that. Also, as a part of learning about writing, I would say is reading. I just think that's a key way to learn about writing and how to write and how to become a better writer and what you enjoy about writing. Also just helps you understand how sentences are constructed, the rise and fall of conflict, what makes a good ending for you as a reader. Even if you don't have an official terminology for how this works, and I will say I don't have a great grounding. I had an education. I've got a couple of degrees, but in terms of understanding things like clauses and syntax, like these are things that I know what the words mean, but I don't actually I couldn't explain those concepts in the way that you should be able to, I suppose, after you get out of middle school or even primary school. I don't know. But I think that if you read a lot, you understand the rules of writing, even if you can't necessarily verbalize what they are. And yeah, it helps you identify what interests you in fiction, which generally will benefit you in terms of, what do I want to write? Also, a vital part of motivation is, unfortunately, letting yourself think. Literally just giving yourself the space to think and not be distracted by other things, not have other content that is occupying your brain. Sometimes, as I've said, reading and watching TV and those sorts of things can be useful for getting your own ideas, but you want to also give yourself the time and space to have deep thoughts, I guess, or have your thoughts really like have room. And I think this is where people talk about, in the middle of the night or in the shower, they have a lot of their brainstorming, just sparks of ideas, because your brain isn't occupied by other things. So I just think that is something that, if you're finding that you're not coming up with good ideas, maybe it's a good idea to have a kind of disconnected walk, or have that shower, or just basically try and disengage a little bit. I think it's still alright to like have time where you're like, this is my brainstorming time, but I find that I'm not as good at those times as I am when I am just letting myself be and allowing myself the room and space and time. If I say this is my brainstorming time and I sit down with pen and paper and notepads and sticky notes, I have found that to be not super useful for me. And I think potentially that's because I'm thinking about all of the different craft angles. I'm thinking about what I should be doing and how to structure it and how to think about, I don't know why I just did that, how to structure it and how to think about it, rather than my story. Like, I'm not thinking about the story, I'm thinking about everything around the story. Important. Community. Finding fellow writers, writing partners, critique partners, friends that you can talk to. I think sometimes it feels like that idea that nobody really wants to hear about other people's dreams. Like, I've heard that so many times that people are like, ugh, they're talking about their dreams, how boring, which isn't true at all for me. Like, I love when people talk about their dreams, like literally sleeping dreams. But I think in that same way of, there are people who don't want to hear about your dreams or your nightmares. Be mindful of who you're talking to, and who will be receptive to that sort of conversation, because I think there are times where it can be a lot worse than not talking to anyone, to be met with a lack of enthusiasm. And I know that that's really hard to gauge, but I think it's important to try, if you can, and talk to people who are going to be enthusiastic. This is maybe just a personal thing as well, but I find it harder when there are people who just kind of detach from the conversation, and I'm like, oh, now I feel bad about myself, as opposed to if you were just like keeping it in your head and thinking about it and maybe talking about to people online. But I think this is where you want to find people who will share your interests. I have not done this yet. I'm hoping to join some sort of a writing group this year. It's hard in the area I live. It feels a bit, like I'm not the ideal member for some of those groups, but I'm going to try and do that. And I think that is a worthy thing to try, because I do have, my partner is quite supportive, and so I can talk through a lot of the different issues I'm having with plot with them, and because they're also invested in dissecting and understanding media in general, I think that is such a massive help to me in understanding and interpreting different parts of my story, and just kind of getting to the next stage, because sometimes you just need to talk it out, and then as you're talking it out, you discover, oh, that doesn't really make sense, or actually I have worked my way around it and now I know how to fix it. So yes, definitely, if you can, find people to talk to, find some way to connect. I think another part of motivation, and this is a very boring part, but I think it's necessary, is scheduling and finding time. Those are two different things, I think. You can be very regimented about it as long as that is something that works for you. I like both. I have my writing day of the week, and that is essentially to ensure that I do any writing, because I have a full-time job. I have, other things in my life. And so it's important that I decided that it's important that I have at least one night where I have that night dedicated to writing, so I can catch up if I need to. But I also take my notebook with me every time I go to work. I try to take it with me out on my lunch breaks. I try to bring it out when I'm on the bus, even if I just have nothing really. I might write like a sentence and then that sparks and I can keep going from there, or it's just a sentence. But at the very least, I have it with me so that if I have ideas come up, I have a mechanism to take them down. Some people work well with like the notes on their phone. I don't. I really don't like typing on my phone. I think it is important not to underestimate those little pockets of time, because if you are finding that if you have an hour set aside, you're like, oh, you're like dreading it because you're like, oh, what if I don't write enough in that hour? Or what if I, like aren't motivated at that particular time? If you have some way of, going to your notes app or going to something where you can take notes along the way, like it doesn't have to be every day. I don't really subscribe to that idea, but if you have it so that you can regularly take notes on the stuff you're working on, it'll just be easier. It means that I think as well, you're giving yourself opportunities throughout the day to think about the story, and that keeps it a little bit more in your head than if you are only sitting down and thinking about it at a particular time. So that's my advice. Schedule if that is useful for you, weekly or daily or monthly, and then find time. Another thing that I think is important leading into kind of goals as well is reflection. I think reflection is important for motivation because it really guides you if you consider, why do you want to do this? Like, why are you interested in writing? Is it something that you're just very passionate about? Is there an idea that you really want to see executed and you just don't think anyone else will do it? Is it that, it comes naturally to you, or it's a challenge that you think is really worth trying? I think as well, it's good to write a list of areas that you are confident in, that you specifically can do in terms of writing. So, and try and be specific about it, but you're thinking in terms of, I think I'm really good at dialogue, or I can identify plot holes really easily. I think these are things that are really good to focus on, because then when you get to the parts of stories that you are struggling with and you feel like, oh, I'm shit at this, it might just be that like you're deep in the action sequence and you know already that that's not one of your strengths. You're deep in a scene that is very atmospheric and you know that you're not so good at description. But if you can look at that list and see, I know that I'm good at, character or whatever. And then in that scene, you're seeing, or you're able to see as you're going through it, you're like, yeah, I can see that I'm still focused on character here. Like, I do still have this, like, not innate ability, but the things that come more naturally. I'm still seeing those present in the draft, even if, there's areas that I need to improve. So I think for myself, I've had a bit of a think about this for myself, because it's one thing to say it and another thing to actually do it. So I haven't written a list yet of the things that I'm confident about, but I have thought about it. And you can see the pros and cons of this as well. Like, try and focus on the positives if you can, but I think I'm pretty good at understanding what people do. Generally, like, I understand that even though this isn't a story, people are behaving more like people would. I know that's pretty general, but I think I am quite focused on character and character motivation and understanding how that last scene influences their attitude going into the next scene. That all comes very naturally to me. It might not come through very well in my videos, but I do have a generally okay vocabulary. So I don't struggle as much finding the words as I'm typing, literally in terms of just understanding, what is the difference between yelled and screamed. Like, little differences in language that do have, like, can have really significant interpretations for a sentence. I have a pretty good sense of those things. So in terms of, going to edits and things like that later on, I don't have to replace words because they were just like the wrong words, unless my brain was just like not turned on that day. But generally, like, I'm not needing to replace a word in every sentence because I haven't been able to put it write in the context. And I think this is one of those things that's quite difficult if you have like English as a second language, because, well, one, there are so many words that have like 5 different meanings and they're all different, but they're the same word. And then there are also just like slight differences in the context and in the way that people use it in daily life, and then depending on the time period and and things like that. So I think I'm really good at those things, and I know the things I'm bad at as well. So I think that it can also be good to write a list of areas that you want to improve, and so you can target that information when you're doing that first, I say first step, these aren't ordered, but that first thing I talked about in terms of learning about craft. Once you know that you've got what you're good at, great. You can focus on that as you're writing your first draft and really think about, it's a first draft. It's not going to be great, but at least you have some sense of like, this is why I'm writing this, because I can execute this part. And then you can also target the information later on that you need to learn a bit more about, in terms of, for me, for example, I've really tried to focus on how to write a better ending. So I've tried to, go back to movies or books that I've really liked the ending of, and then looked at like, why do I like this? And, innately I understand the idea of someone starts one place, they end up in a different place so you can see their journey. But what about all the plot around that? Like, what do I actually like that to look like? So I think it's good to, look at the pros and cons and really reflect on yourself as a writer. As I've said, also reflecting on what you like is important generally. So we get to the actual goal setting part. I like goals. I don't know how I would do without any goals. I don't think I would like it. I'm not usually a long-term goal person though. I'm usually like week to week. I have a weekly word count. And so that worked out pretty well for me last year. So I'll be doing that. The only difference is now I'm in editing. I have a kind of deadline for each of my chapters. Instead of looking at it on a weekly level, I'm focused on a chapter level, because I'm not also looking at it in terms of word count, which is different. As I was going through last year, first year doing writing as much as I was, and also, first year basically committing to it for the full year, it was really important for me to have some sort of timeline. And even if I didn't know exactly how long that would take, I just kind of like bumped up what other people said was their timeline. I think a guide is good. And for my goals, I tried to make them possible to achieve and flexible with my general life and schedule. That's really important for me, because I think some people benefit from stretch goals, and I've seen that for the 2026 like goals videos for other people. They like to have big goals that really push them to go further and try harder. Whereas others like me find that to be incredibly demoralizing. Like, if there is a chance that I won't meet my goal, I may as well not have the goal. Like, I hate a goal that I don't think is possible. It's alright if it's like a little bit of a stretch. Like if I did 1,000 words this week and I can do 1,200 next week, that's fine. That's achievable. But if I was like, I'd like to publish this year, that would be very out of scope. And even if that was like a long-term goal, I think it wouldn't feel good for me. But for other people, I think that's where it's really important to know yourself and your goals and how it works for you. If I don't achieve my mini goals, like the weekly word count, it makes me feel like that big goal is impossible as well. And I'll just give up. So in terms of word count goals, I'd have a goal of 2,000 for some weeks, 4,000 for others, depending on my plans and energy levels as well. So I kind of tried to shift my goals, my shorter term goals, in terms of knowing what I was going to be doing in a given week. I didn't want to constantly have a higher word count that I could achieve and then have to scale it down because I didn't meet them. I'd rather start low, and then as I've gone into my week and maybe I'm on Wednesday and I'm already at 2,000 words, I can shift that up. So just important to know yourself there, I think. And you can try different things and see how you feel about it. It's very much like emotion driven for me. Like, if I don't feel like I can do my goals, it just feels pointless. So also probably good if you haven't done a ton of writing to test yourself a little bit and see. I kind of did treat last year mostly as like, this is all just trying to set a baseline, just trying to work out what I can do, and that really helped inform what my plans are for 2026. And I will pull those up now. All right, so if we're looking at my plans for 2026, I have already achieved one of the big ones, which was to complete my first draft of Project Possession. It is the 25th of January now, and I have finished it off at 70,000 and like 20 words, so just scraping above what I wanted for the word count. Yay, I just did that, I think it was yesterday. Wow. Time goes quick. But I was absolutely thrilled to do that because it's, it's been a lot. I've learned a lot from that project. It's been a lot. It's hard to write a horror story, it turns out. But yeah, I imagine there's going to be a lot of reworking before I get to the second draft, but that is what I am kind of planning to do this year. So I have, as I said, finished the first draft, hoping to, in about April, read the first draft, probably early April or late March potentially. Read the first draft of that. I've already taken some notes on what I think I want to edit, but editing I have basically going until October. I imagine it's going to be a bit of an overhaul of that project. So, and I will also be working on other things at the same time. So I'm hoping that I'll have a completed second draft of Project Possession in October. Project Jasmine, I am in the process of editing right now. It's actually going quite well. I have finished Act 1. Yeah, I finished Act 1. So I'm currently like, I think 27,000 words in, 26,000. And I will be editing that until March is my plan. And then I'm hoping to give it, a few weeks and then read through that second draft, do some line edits, or if I identify something that's like really key to fix, I'll do that there. I have it very optimistically that I will be sending it to beta readers in May. Who knows whether that is a possible thing, especially given that I haven't, established those relationships yet. I would hope to do that, but we'll see. The idea would basically be like incorporating that feedback and then hopefully completing a third draft at some point, depending on when or if I get that beta reader feedback. I would actually say that my primary focus is probably editing Project Jasmine because I feel the most excited about that one. But my second biggest would be a first draft for Project Stonebird, which is a fantasy I am in the process of kind of brainstorming now. I'm very excited about it. I feel like it's going to have a real good sense of humor, but also like an interesting and kind of dark world. So I'm excited for it. I will begin the first draft, I think either end of February or beginning of March. Main drafting work this year will be on Project Stonebird, and then I'm hoping to complete that by about September. I've kind of thought about it, and I would like to get to a point where my first drafts are completed within about 6 months. So far I've done it within, I think it's like 5 to 7 months, what my first drafts have been so far. So I think it's possible. It's just, for Project Stonebird, that is 90,000, so it's a little bit more than the one I just finished, and I want to give it time because it's a fantasy as well. Like, I feel like it's going to have some complicated elements. Yeah, and then hopefully if I get that done, I can do a read through of the first draft in December. And the reason I'm kind of leaving a blank bit in that zone is that I really want to do like Novella November, which is, I'm thinking about 30,000 words. I have an idea. It's like a psychological horror with like feminist elements. I think it's going to be Project Convalescence, which is a bit of a wordy one, but I just like the word convalescence. And that I'm hoping to prep in September and October, and then writing the first draft in obviously November. That's the whole thing. If I'm doing it like a NaNoWriMo style thing, then I'm writing every day about 1,000 words. I'll probably divide it differently because of my actual work and life, but hoping to finish that 30,000 words within the month of November, and then if I need to, just like completing it in December. leaving myself a nice chill December to kind of think about everything as well. Biggest tasks, I guess, other than writing, which is very self-driven, self-dependent, and that's what I like. I like to have goals that are not dependent on other people if I can. Writing is very hard to do that if you ever want to have other people read your work. And that might not be a goal of yours. If you just want to write and get better, you don't necessarily need to. But for myself, I really would like, I think I would like people to read it someday. That's a hard thing for me to admit, but I think I would like people to read at least Project Jasmine, because I think that's really fun. And I think that's something that people would enjoy because, there can't only be me who has like an equal obsession with Regency romances and vampire stories. So I know my people are out there, and I would honestly like to make that one a series if I can. So that would probably be another part of this year. It would be fleshing out what other stories in the series would look like. I have ideas for basically like 2 others and then a hesitant idea for a third. I feel like 4 is just a good number. 4 would be a good number to have in this series. But we'll see. I don't want to put many carts before many horses. So yes, other than writing, joining a writers group. I have that kind of scheduled for March, maybe February. That's so scary because that would be so close, but that's on my list. And then finding beta readers. So that would need to happen probably by April, if I want to send things off to beta readers in May. And it would be good to kind of establish those relationships earlier if I can. I'm just looking at my spreadsheet if you can see my eyes like scattering about the place. I even have some plans for 2027, which, involve kind of doing some editing of Stonebird. And then I basically have plans up until 2030 because I thought about it last year and I was like, oh, how long would it take if I wanted to self-publish or try and get an agent or any of those things? Obviously, if I wanted to just put something up online for free, I could do that now, but I would like to see what my options are. I think, it is a dream, the idea of having a printed book you can release out into the world in some form. So I basically have this year and last year were just learning, just getting a sense of it, just trying to work out if it's even something that's for me. I think I feel pretty confident that it's for me. Whether or not I want to turn it into something that I have to invest money in, basically, and then maybe get money in return is like a whole other board game. It's ball game. Yeah, so if I did that, I have in this 5-year plan to start querying in 2028. Who knows? I mean, that's 2 years away, so we've got time. But also, do we? And with that, I hope this has been useful for you. If you have any tips for how you motivate yourself as well, I think it would be good to have them in the comments and be very useful for people. I like to try different things. I think that's an important part of it as well. If you are, like me, afforded the ability to try different things and see what works for you, definitely. Don't commit yourself if you don't have to. If you don't have to. If you don't have deadlines for writing, if it is at this stage just about learning how you work, try different things. So thank you for listening, and good luck with your writing, and I will see you next time. Bye.